Hello, and welcome to day 14. I know it's day 14 because we've only been 14 chapters in. Speaking of 14 chapters, I just want you all to know, that I have no idea how many chapters this has. So I'm in the dark just as much as you are as I roll off screen. Okay, so this volume has 15. Oh, okay, so we're almost there. How many does the next volume have? Volume 2. For those intrigued about what the next volume could possibly be called. Feels like we're going to be about the same. Getting close. Oh, we passed it. Okay. It is 16. So it'll take us about a month, and we're pretty much almost halfway through. For a couple of qualifiers, those are called. I'm going to blast through today because I have a call at 3 to talk about my thesis, which may or may not happen. We don't know when. There's a lot of drama going on, and I don't know. School starts in 11 days, and I have no idea what concentration I am. I don't know what classes I'm taking. I don't know. I don't think I'm enrolled in enough units for any of the classes, any concentration that I would want to take. I don't have the money that I need to make the theses, and things could be worse, but they'd have to try. I mean, no, they wouldn't. Like, things could definitely be worse. I'm not asking for anything. Okay, so let's get into this before I say anything else weird. What happened yesterday? So, yesterday, Catherine finally says to Miss Tilney, let's go on a walk. And they're like, great, we'll go tomorrow. It's perfect. It's great. It's awesome. It's wonderful. She heads back over to her table where her quote-unquote friends are. Her quote-unquote friends being Isabella, John, and James. And aren't John and James both Bible dudes? See, this is why we like Henry. I don't know where his name is in the Bible, but okay. Anyways, all of that. So she walks over to Isabella, John, and James, her so-called friends, and they're like, great news, Catherine. We've got a plan to finish our original drive tomorrow. And Catherine's like, oh, no. That's too bad because I'm going to go on a walk with Miss Tilney tomorrow, so I won't be able to come. And they're like, what? No, you have to come. Like, no, there's no, just tell her that you had like a previous engagement and you can't come. And Catherine's like, well, that would be a lie. So no, I'm not going to do that. And they're like, and Isabella's like, oh, but babe, it's going to be so fun if you come. Like, I can't imagine not going with you. And like, just tell her like that you can't go with her tomorrow. Like, it's fine. They'll just go on a walk on Tuesday. And Catherine's like, listen, I understand, but like, no. Oh, I just had a thought. Never mind. Listen, like, no, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to lie to her. And then Isabella's like, you're actually kind of mean. Like, it's kind of rude that you won't do this for me, your best friend who loves you unconditionally. And Catherine's like, actually, it's not really that rude. I'm just like keeping a promise. And then John comes over and he's like, I just told Miss Tilney that you couldn't go tomorrow. And she's like, you did what? And he's like, yeah, she just left. So I guess you have to come with us. Like, it's all fine. I figured it out for you. Don't worry. And Catherine's like, screw you, Mom. I'm going to go after Miss Tilney and tell her that that's not the case because I am not a liar. And you don't get to make those decisions for me. And we said, hell yeah, Catherine, as she ran off after Miss Tilney. And she got to Miss Tilney and she was like, listen, like, I'm so sorry. There was a mix up. My friend said that I couldn't come, but I'm totally still coming with you. I'm so sorry. And Miss Tilney was like, dude, it's so fine. I thought it was weird, but I'm really glad that you actually do just want to come with us. And that's where we left off yesterday in Northanger Abbey. Let's do it. Okay. Northanger Abbey, chapter 14. The next morning was fair, and Catherine almost expected another attack from the assembled party. With Mr. Allen to support her, she felt no dread of the event, but she would gladly be spared. Oh, yeah. And she was like, she goes to Mr. Allen afterwards, and she's like, was I right to, like, do that? And Mr. Allen's like, yeah, of course. It's actually kind of improper that they're just, like, you were going to go riding around the countryside with, like, this dude. And Catherine's like, oh, my God. I'm just so glad I didn't go. And that's what happened. But she would gladly be spared a contest where the victory itself was painful, and was heartily rejoiced therefore at neither seeing nor hearing anything of them. The Tilneys called for her at the appointed time, and no new difficulty arising, no sudden recollection, no unexpected summons, no impertinent intrusion to disconcert their measures, my heroine was most unnaturally able to fulfill her engagement, though it was made with the hero himself. They determined on walking round beach and cliff, that noble hill whose beautiful verdure and hanging coppice render it so striking an object from almost every opening in Bath. I never look at it, said Catherine as they walked along the side of the river, without thinking of the south of France. You have been abroad, then, said Henry, a little surprised. Oh, no. I mean, what I have read about it. It always puts me in the mind of the country that Emily and her father have traveled through in the mysteries of Udolpho. Have you, but you never but you never read novels, I dare say. Why not? Because they are not clever enough for you. Gentlemen read better books. The person, be it lady or gentleman, who has not pleasure in a good novel, must be intolerably stupid. I have read all Mrs. Radcliffe's works, and most of them with great pleasure. The Mysteries of Udolpho, when I had once begun it, I could not lay down again. I remember finishing it in 2 days, my hair standing on end the whole time. Yes, added Miss Tilney, I remember you undertook to read it aloud to me, and that when I was called for only 5 minutes to answer a note, instead of waiting for me, you took the volume into the Hermitage Walk, and I was obliged to stay till you had finished it. Thank you, Eleanor, a most honorable testimony. You see, Miss Morland, the injustice of your suspicions. Here I was, in my eagerness to get on, refusing to wait only 5 minutes for my sister, breaking the promise I had made of reading it aloud, and keeping her in suspense at a most interesting part, by running away with the volume, which you are to observe was her own, particularly her own. I am proud when I reflect on it, and I think it must establish me in your good opinion. I like it. This is so sweet. This is great. We're living high. I'm very glad to hear it indeed, and now I shall never be ashamed of liking Udolpho myself. I really thought before young men despised novels amazingly. It is amazingly. It may well suggest amazement if they do, for they read nearly as many as women. I myself have read hundreds and hundreds. Do not imagine that you can cope with me in knowledge of Julia's and Louisa's. If we proceeded to particulars and engage in the never-ceasing inquiry of have you read this and have you read that, I shall soon leave you as far behind as me. What shall I say? I want an appropriate simile. As far as your friend Emily herself left poor Valancourt when she went with her aunt into Italy. Consider how many years I have had a start of you. How old are you? I'm nervous. I think he's 24. Just on the edge. Just on the edge. I entered on my studies at Oxford while you were a young little girl working your sampler at home. I think Udolpho the nicest book in the world. The nicest, by which I suppose you mean the neatest. That must depend on the binding. What? Henry, said Miss Tilney, you're very impertinent. Miss Morland, he is treating you exactly as he does his sister. He is forever finding fault with me for some incorrectness of language, and now he is taking the same liberty with you. The word nicest, as you used it, did not suit him, and you had better change it as soon as you can, or we shall be overpowered with Johnston and Blair all the rest of the way. I'm sure, cried Catherine, I did not mean to say anything wrong, but it is a nice book, and why should I not call it so? Very true, said Henry. And this is a very nice day, and we are taking a very nice walk, and you two are very nice ladies. Oh, it is a very nice word indeed. It does for everything. Originally, perhaps, it was applied only to express neatness, propriety, delicacy, and refinement. People were nice in their dress, in their sentiments, or their choices. But now every commendation on every subject is comprised in that one word. Well, in fact, cried his sister, it ought only to be applied to you without any commendation at all. You are more nice than wise. Come, Miss Morland, let us leave him to meditate over our faults in the utmost propriety of diction, while we praise Udolpho in whatever terms we like best. It is a most interesting work. You are fond of that kind of reading? To say the truth, I do not much like any other. Indeed, that is, I can read poetry and plays and things of that sort, and do not dislike travels. But history, real solemn history, I'm fond of history. I wish I were too. I read it a little as a duty, but it tells me nothing that does not either vex or weary me. The quarrels of popes and kings with wars or pestilences in every page. The men all so good for nothing, and hardly any woman at all. Snaps! It is very tiresome, and yet I often think it odd that it should be so dull, for a great deal of it must be invention. The speeches that are put into the heroes' mouths, their thoughts and designs. The chief of all this must be invention, and invention is what delights me in other books. Historians, you think, said Miss Tilney, are not happy in their flights of fancy. They display imagination without raising interest. I am fond of history, and am very well contented to take the false with the true. In the principal facts, they have sources of intelligence in former histories or records, which may be as much depended on, I conclude, as anything that does not actually pass under one's own observation. And as for the little embellishments you speak of, they are embellishments, and I like them as such. If a speech be well drawn up, I read it with pleasure, by whomever so it may be made, and probably with much greater if the production of Mr. Hume or Mr. Robertson, than if the genuine words of Cardicus, Agricola. It's literally Agricola. Agricola. Or Alfred the Great. You are fond of history. Okay. You are fond of history, this is Catherine again. And so are Mr. Allen and my father, and I have 2 brothers who do not dislike it. So many instances within my small circle of friends is remarkable. At this rate, I shall not pity the writers of history any longer. If people like to read their books, that is all very well. But to be at so much trouble in filling great volumes, which, as I used to think, nobody would ever willingly look into, to be laboring only for the torment of little boys and girls, always struck me as a hard fate. And though I know it is all very right and necessary, I have often wondered at the person's courage that could sit down on purpose to do it. That little boys and girls should be tormented, said Henry, is what no one at all acquainted with human nature in a civilized state can deny. But in behalf of our most distinguished historians, I must observe that they might well be offended at being supposed to have no higher aim, and that by their method and style they are perfectly well qualified to torment readers of the most advanced reason and mature time of life. I use the verb to torment, as I observe to be your own method, instead of to instruct, supposing them to be now admitted as synonymous. Henry needs to get his head out of the dictionary. You think me foolish to call instruction a torment, but if you had been as much used as myself to hear poor little children first learning their letters and then learning to spell, if you had ever seen how stupid they can be for the whole morning together, and how tired my poor mother is at the end of it, as I am in the habit of seeing almost every day of my life at home, you would allow that to torment and to instruct might sometimes be used as a synonymous word. Very probably. But historians are not accountable for the difficulty of learning to read, and even you yourself, who do not altogether seem particularly friendly to severe, very intense application, may perhaps be brought to acknowledge that it is very well worthwhile to be tormented for 2 or 3 years of one's life, for the sake of being able to read all the rest of it. Consider, if reading had not been taught, Mr. Radcliffe would have written in vain, or perhaps might not have written at all. Catherine assented, and a very warm panegyric from Catherine assented, and a very warm panegyric from her on that lady's merits closed the subject. The Tilneys were soon engaged in another on which she had nothing to say. They were viewing the country with the eyes of persons accustomed to drawing, and decided on its capability of being formed into pictures with all the eagerness of real taste. Here Catherine was quite lost. She knew nothing of drawing, nothing of taste, and she listened to them with attention which brought her little profit, for they always talked in phrases which conveyed scarcely any idea to her. The little which she could understand, however, appeared to contradict the very few notions she had entertained on the matter before. It seemed as if a good view were no longer to be taken from the top of a high hill, and that a clear blue sky was no longer a proof of a fine day. She was heartily ashamed of her ignorance, a misplaced shame. Where people wish to attach, they should always be ignorant. To come with a well-informed mind is to come with an inability of administering to the vanity of others, which a sensible person would always wish to avoid. A woman especially, if she have the misfortune of knowing anything, should conceal it as well as she can. I'm bad at that. I'm like, I have a fact to share, and I am going to share it. Why do I have so many? There we go. The penny dropped. The advantages of natural folly in a beautiful girl have been already set forth by the capital pen of a sister author, and to her treatment of the subject I will only add in justice to men, that though to the larger and more trifling part of the sex, imbecility in females is a greater enhancement of their personal charms, there is a portion of them too reasonable and too well informed themselves to desire anything more in woman than ignorance. I don't know what Jude's saying. I don't think I fully agree. But Catherine did not know her own advantages, did not know that a good-looking girl with an affectionate heart and a very ignorant mind cannot fail of attracting a clever young man, unless circumstances are particularly untoward. Okay, I guess Jane's trying to say that men like girls who don't know shit. Which, I mean, it's not true, ladies. I'm here to bring you the good news that that is not true. Let's let's move on. In the present instance, she confessed and lamented her want of knowledge, declared that she would give anything in the world to be able to draw, and a lecture on the picturesque immediately followed, in which his instructions were so clear that she soon began to see beauty in everything admired by him, and her attention was so earnest that he became perfectly satisfied of her having a great deal of natural taste. He talked of foregrounds, distances, and second distances, side screens and perspectives, lights and shades, and Catherine was so hopeful a scholar that when they gained the top of beach and cliff, she voluntarily rejected the whole city of Bath as unworthy to make part of the landscape. Delighted with her progress and fearful of wearying her with too much wisdom at once, Henry suffered of the subject to decline, and by an easy transition from a piece of rocky fragment and the withered oak, which he had placed near its summit, to oaks in general, to forests, the enclosure of them, waste lands, crown lands, and government, he shortly found himself arrived at politics, and from politics it was an easy step to silence. My connection is unstable, which is strange because I'm the only one here, so I don't know what she's. Oh my god, I just realized my new Wi-Fi is going to get installed in like 2 days. Where was I? The general pause which succeeded his short disquisition on the state of the nation was put an end by Catherine, who, in rather a solemn tone of voice, uttered these words: "It will soon come out in London." Miss Tilney, to whom this was chiefly addressed, was startled and hastily replied, "Indeed, and of what nature?" "That I do not know, nor who is the author. I have only heard that it is to be more horrible than anything we have met with yet." "Good heaven! Where could you hear of such a thing?" "A particular friend of mine had an account of it in a letter from London yesterday. It is to be uncommonly dreadful. I shall expect a murder and everything of that kind." "You speak with astonishing composure, but I hope your friend's accounts have been exaggerated, and if such a design is known beforehand, proper measures will undoubtedly be taken by government to prevent its coming to effect." "Government," said Henry, endeavoring not to smile, "neither desires nor dares to interfere in such matters. There must be murder, and our government cares not how much." What? The ladies stared. He laughed and added, "Come, shall I make you understand each other, or leave you to puzzle out an explanation as you can? No, I will be noble. I will prove myself a man, no less by the generosity of my soul than the clearness of my head. I have no patience with such of my sex as disdain to let themselves sometimes down the comprehension of yours. Perhaps the abilities of woman are neither sound nor acute, neither vigorous nor keen. What? Perhaps they may want observation, discernment, judgment, fire, genius, and wit. Miss Morland, do not mind what he says, but have the goodness to satisfy me as to this dreadful riot." "Riot? What riot?" "My dear Eleanor, the riot is only in your own brain. The confusion there is scandalous." Okay. Never mind. I think it's Henry again. "My dear Eleanor, the riot is only in your own brain. The confusion there is scandalous. Miss Morland has been talking of nothing more dreadful than a new publication which is shortly to come out in 3 duodecimo volumes. Duodecimo volumes. It's duodecimo? I don't think it's duodecimo. I want it to be. 276 pages each, with a frontispiece to the front and two tombstones and a lantern. Do you understand? And you, Miss Morland. Oh boy. My stupid sister has mistaken all your clearest expressions. You talked of expected horrors in London, and instead of instantly conceiving, as any rational creature would have, that such words could relate only to a circulating library, she immediately pictured to herself a mob of 3,000 men assembling in St. George's Fields, the Bank attacked, the Tower threatened, the streets of London flowing with blood, a detachment of the 12th Light Dragoons, the hopes of the nation, called up from Northampton to quell the insurgents, and the gallant Captain Frederick Tilney, in the moment of charging at the head of his troop, knocked off his horse by a brickbat from an upper window. Forgive her stupidity. God. The fears of the sister have added to the general weakness of woman, but she is by no means a simpleton in general. Oh, Mr. Tilney, how the great shall fall. Catherine looked grave. And now, Henry, said Miss Tilney, that you have made us understand each other, you may as well make Miss Morland understand yourself, unless you mean to have her think you are intolerably rude to your sister, and a great brute in your opinion of women in general. Miss Morland is not used to your odd doubt, but that is no explanation at present. What am I to do? You know what you ought to do. Clear your character unhandsomely before her. Tell her that you think very highly of the understanding of woman. Miss Morland, I think very highly of the understanding of all the women in the world, especially of those, whoever they may be, with whom I happen to be in company. That is not enough. Be more serious. Miss Morland, no one can think more highly of the understanding of woman than I do. Oh, boy. But I do assure you that he must be entirely misunderstood if he can ever appear to say an unjust thing of any woman at all, or an unkind one of me. It was no effort to Catherine to believe that Henry Tilney could never be wrong. His manners might sometimes surprise, but his meaning must always be just. And what she did not understand, she was almost as ready to admire as what she did. The whole walk was delightful, and though it ended too soon, its conclusion was delightful too. Her friends attended her into the house, and Miss Tilney, before they parted, addressing herself with respectful form, as much to Mrs. Allen as to Catherine, petitioned for the pleasure of her company to dinner on the day after the next. No difficulty was made on Mrs. Allen's side, and the only difficulty on Catherine's was in concealing the excess of her pleasure. The morning had passed away so charmingly as to banish all her friendship and natural affection. What? All her, I guess. To banish all her friendship and natural affection, for no thought of Isabella or James had crossed her during their walk. When the Tilneys were gone, she became amiable again. She was amiable for some time to little effect. Mrs. Allen had no intelligence to give that could relieve her anxiety. She had heard nothing of any of them. Towards the end of the morning, however, Catherine, having occasion for some indispensable yard of ribbon, which must be bought without a moment's delay, walked out into town, and in Bond Street overtook the second Miss Thorpe, as she was loitering towards Edgar's building between two of the sweetest girls in the world, who had been her dear friends all the morning. From her she soon learned that the party at Clifton had taken place. They set off at 8 this morning, said Miss Anne, and I'm sure I do not envy them their drive. I think you and I are very well off to be out of the scrape. It must be the dullest thing in the world. For there is not a soul at Clifton at this time of year. Belle went with your brother, and John drove Maria. Catherine spoke the pleasure she really felt on hearing this part of the engagement. Oh, yes, rejoiced the other. Maria's gone. She was quite wild to go. She thought it would be something very fine. I cannot say I admire her taste. For my part, I was determined from the first not to go if they pressed me ever so much. Catherine, a little doubtful of this, could not help answering, I wish you could have gone too. It is a pity you could not all go. Thank you, but it is quite a matter of indifference to me. Indeed, I would not have gone on any account. I was saying so to Emily and Sophia when you overtook us. Catherine was still unconvinced, but glad that Anne should have the friendship of an Emily and Sophia to console her, she bade her adieu without much uneasiness, and returned home, pleased the party had not been prevented by her refusing to join in, and very heartily wishing that it might be too pleasant to allow either James or Isabella to resent her resistance any longer. And that's the end of the chapter, which is perfect, right on time. I'm going to log off for today. Having fun. I don't like guys who joke about how You're like, oh yeah, because like women are so dumb, and it's like, nope. And there's still guys like that. Honestly, like anytime someone's like, oh yeah, I drink that respect woman juice, I'm like, but you don't really though, right? Like because you had to say that, like you don't. So anyways, if you're claiming to drink the respect woman juice in those exact words, do you evaluate yourself? That's all I have for today. I'm gonna log off really quick so I can go jump onto my phone call and drink some water. But tomorrow is Monday, so I'll be in at 3. So I better get my shopping done early. Okay, I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in. Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye.